All right, so there's two types of focus that we're going to cover in this video, and based on the research, while one is more effective than the other, we're going to go into which one might actually be more right for you. Have you ever had one of those days where you're playing and everything is going perfectly and you just don't know why? And when you look back, you weren't thinking about the way your body was positioned, the way your wrist was turned or your grip, and instead your attention was actually focused outwards. And you look back and you're wondering why was this session different from any other? Or maybe you're like me and you've taken a private lesson with a coach and you walked away feeling like you didn't really get that much from it. And then you've taken a private lesson with a completely different coach and you feel like you walked away with everything. They were just saying all the right words to you, all the right cues. There are so many high-level athletes that perform extraordinarily, and when you ask them how they do it, they don't know. They can't really explain it. And I say that to say that I want to explore that. There are so many variables in play and so many things happening simultaneously that they don't always know. These high-level athletes have reached a point of automation. They don't think, they just do. So in this episode, we're going to go over what is external and internal focus of attention, and how do they differ, and how do they also affect you. And I have some tips for you that you can walk away with and try out next time you play. As always, I'm going to go into the research behind this. So this one is particularly exciting for me because there's this researcher. Her name is Gabriele Wulf, and she's dedicated her entire career and research to the field of motor learning, more specifically, attentional focus. And it's exciting for me because this is something I struggle with a lot. This was something I struggled with back when I was fighting, back when I did jiu-jitsu, and kind of just in my everyday life. And so I found this really, really helpful and want to share it with you. Okay, so the basics. Attentional focus refers to the location to which a performer pays attention while performing a certain movement. And as I mentioned before, there's two different types, external and internal. So Gabriele Wulf first defined an internal focus as one that is directed at the performer's own body movements, and an external focus as one that is directed at the effects that his or her movement have on the environment. Internal focuses more on body parts or movements themselves.
I am Iron Man.
Like when someone says extend your hips or bend your knees, turn your shoulders, turn your wrist a certain way. Some examples from tennis. So rotational power on a ground stroke, right? We can relate to this. An internal cue would be turn your shoulders. An external cue would be shirt logo facing the singles line. Let's look at another example. So racket prep on ground strokes. You've probably heard this plenty of times. An internal cue would be keep your wrist up. An external cue would be point the tip of your racket to the sky. So in external, you're directing your attention to something in the environment around you. This could be things like the paddle, the ball, the net, a specific target. Some examples would be hit the ball at its apex. So do you notice the difference between the two? Key differentiator is the removal of conscious thought. What happens when you focus internally? When individuals focus on the movements of their body, internal focus, they interfere with the automatic processes of motor behavior. The interference that results from this conscious control of the motor control system results in decreased accuracy, slower movements, and overall depressed motor performance. Okay, so what I got from that is internal focus obstructs automatic information processing. This is a mental process that's associated with speed, efficiency, requiring little cognitive effort, and does not require active control or attention by the performer. You may have previously heard of this referred to as the flow state. So what happens when you focus externally? So back to external focus, just a quick refresher. In external, you're directing your attention to something in the environment that's around you. You're focused on the intended outcome or effect. Okay, in Gabriele Wulf's study, analysis revealed when participants followed the external instructions, they had significantly faster movement times compared to when they followed the internal set of instructions, as well as the control group. And consistent with previous research, the internal and control group, no specific focus, movement times were not significantly different from each other. So, unlike internal focus, external focus stimulates that automatic information processing, and that results in an improvement in motor adjustment. Focusing on the movement's effects allows for a more automatic mode of control. It promotes the utilization of unconscious, fast, and reflexive control processes, with the result that the desired outcome is achieved almost as a byproduct. So in addition to this, numerous studies conducted over the past decade or so have provided considerable evidence that an external focus of attention is beneficial not only for more advanced performers, but for the inexperienced or novice as well. An external focus is not only more effective for performance and learning compared to an internal focus, but also results in greater movement economy. Greater movement economy is basically efficient energy expenditure relative to the task. Try saying that 5 times. Efficient energy expenditure relative to the task. Efficient energy, okay. An external focus appears to speed the learning process so that a higher skill level is achieved sooner. All right, so I switched rooms because 1, I like filming in sunlight. Also, I had to put on my cardigan. Remember that joke from Dumb and Dumber? The cop's like, pull over, pull over. He's like, no, it's a cardigan, but thanks for noticing. All right, back to it. So where were we? We were talking about external cues. So that could be a target, that could be your paddle, that could be your opponent. If you want someone to turn their shoulders to the right, you can be like, have your logo facing the crowd to the right. It does require a little bit more creativity, right? But what we're noticing from the studies is that external cues are beneficial for not only intermediate and advanced, but also novice learners and performers. So they performed studies in a number of different sports and sports skills. I won't get into all of them because obviously this is for pickleball, but I do want to say this because it adds a lot of context and I want to give relative examples. So let's look at, I think golf is a pretty good example, right? It's like a single individual. You have an instrument in your hand. A swing is a big part of it. There's a little bit less movement in golf, obviously. It's a lot of like stationary, but let's look at this. Other studies have demonstrated learning benefits of external versus internal foci for a variety of sports skills. For example, the accuracy of golf shots has been shown to be enhanced when the performer's attention is directed to the swinging motion of the club rather than to the swing of their arms. Interestingly, this is the case not only for novices, but even for expert golfers. Furthermore, movement accuracy has also been shown to increase with an external focus in basketball free throw shooting, dart throwing, football kicks, and volleyball serves and soccer kicks. Many reported experiments have demonstrated beneficial effects of using an external focus of attention in a variety of movement-related contexts, especially when performing motor skills that require a need for the accurate placement of an object. Sound familiar? Pickleball. So what are some of the benefits of an external focus? We're looking at lower energy expenditure, both physical and mental, and there's also benefits in retention and faster skill acquisition. So why is an external focus more beneficial? Trying to consciously control one's movements constrains the motor system by interfering with automatic motor control processes that would normally regulate the movement. Focusing on the movement effect, on the other hand, might allow the motor system to more naturally self-organize, resulting in more effective performance and learning. So they go into this a little bit deeper and they explain why. So trying to consciously intervene in these control processes, as participants under internal focus condition appear to do, may result in a freezing or constraining of the degrees of freedom. Degrees of freedom is a very popular term that's coined by Nikolai Bernstein, who I've mentioned in the previous videos, very prominent figure in this ecological approach and in motor learning in general. But basically, degrees of freedom is a number of different possibilities available to the performer. So external focus not only impacts the performance, but learning as well. So this is really interesting because they measured this by using retention tests. The external focus group demonstrated superior learning, i.e. larger movement amplitudes, compared with both the internal focus and a control group without focus instructions. So they even had a study on running on a treadmill and found that the individual who focused on the video display that simulated running outdoors had a reduced oxygen consumption compared to the other two who were focused on a movement relevant aspect of the task, like running form, or movement irrelevant aspect of the task, like breathing. Okay, so in what instances does someone focus internally? There have been some findings that support using internal cues for beginners. So I've mentioned this before in previous videos that context is everything. And I've also heard a few high-level coaches talk about how they use both an internal and external focus depending on the individual. A lot of it comes down to the skill level, although based on the research does tend to skew towards external focus of attention, but I'm not going to say that that applies to every single individual, right? So something to try. When asked to set themselves a process goal, those who chose a goal related to the technique, internal focus, performed more slowly. Those who set a goal related to the strategy, such as a position of the ball in relation to the cones, an external focus, maintained performance speed. In case you're wondering, this definitely does get more nuanced. They talk about the distance of the focus and how that affects the performer. So they talk about if it's closer to the body, they call that proximal. And if it's further from the body, they call that distal. If you want me to go into that in another video, I definitely can. So something that came to mind when I started this educational series is the context, right? Like, I didn't come from tennis. I didn't come from ping pong, didn't come from badminton, whatever, any other like racket sports. I did come from professional fighting and jiu-jitsu, but in terms of racket sports and having an instrument in your hand, I didn't come from those backgrounds. So what I'm hoping is that this helps individuals who are similar to me. And if you did start in one of those sports, great. I'm sure there's something that you can learn from that too. So another thing that's come up is, why am I creating these videos in this particular sequence? Where and how you focus your attention matters when you're learning and in this skill development. It's one of those habits that's better to develop and improve early in your journey rather than later. Speaking of later, I will get into practice design eventually. I still have a couple videos that need to be put out before we get to that point. And videos like this will help you understand the practice design eventually when we do get there.